May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Years ago, more than I'd like to admit, I think, as I think back on this story, I used to sail a lot with a friend of mine. And it was a friend and a neighbor, family friend, and we would go out sailing pretty regularly. And it was about a 17-foot boat, real sturdy, an old, heavily built boat. It really was not going to tip over, and it wasn't going to capsize. It was a really good, safe boat. And we really enjoyed spending the summers sailing. And one fall day we went out, and there might have been a small craft advisory on the bay that day, and that is still considered a small craft. And we really shouldn't have been out there, but out we went because it was a nice day, and we said, oh, it can't be that bad. Well, the wind picked up, and the storm clouds came in, and quickly the front sail, the jib sail, was ripping, and so that had to come down, except the boat was, leaning on its side, and so the sail ends up in the water. And if you've never tried to get a sail out of the water while the boat is moving, it's a real interesting experience, one that I don't highly recommend. But so we get that sail out, and as that happens, the mainsail is starting to rip, and so that sail comes down quickly. And we have to figure out how, with this little 4-horsepower motor that was meant to get us out of the canal, we need to figure out how to get back to shore. It was really quite a scary moment. Not terribly scary. South Oyster Bay is pretty shallow. We probably should have just run the boat aground in the middle of the bay and walked back most of the way. But no, we figured out our way in. The story ends dramatically where we crash somebody's cocktail party, but that's a story for another day. It was a comedy of errors, but I look back on that moment and I do think, boy, I can relate to those disciples in the boat as the storm waves pick up, and they were afraid in today's gospel story. They're afraid, and they look out and they see what they think is a ghost walking towards them, and it turns out it's Jesus walking along the water. And they cry out in fear, and Peter says, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you." And Jesus invites him to walk on the water, and Peter starts to walk on the water and realizes all of a sudden that there's a storm around him, and the waves have white caps on them, and the wind is blowing, and he starts to sink. And Jesus reaches down and picks him up out of the water, and says that line so familiar to us, "O ye of little faith, why did you doubt?" And Jesus gets back in the boat, gets into the boat with them, and the storm is calmed. We could easily make this story about Jesus walking on water. Could easily say that this is about Jesus' command over the natural world. We could say that was the miracle. We could also say that this story is about Peter's lack of faith. That it was Peter he took these steps and then, he doubted along the way. Peter who's always messing up. And Peter messes up along the way, and Jesus has to rescue him again. O ye of little faith. And we could turn this into a story about times when our faith hasn't really held us up in the midst of the storms. And it's, we could sort of shame people into thinking their faith isn't strong enough. I think the miracle in this story is not Jesus walking on water or calming the sea. Though that's pretty miraculous. I don't think that's the real miracle. I think the real miracle is Peter taking the first step out of the boat. I think that's the real miracle in this story. Peter being willing to take that first step. I'm not checking my email or text messages at this time. Meister Eckhart said, And suddenly you know it's time to start something new and trust the magic of beginnings. It's time to start something new and trust the magic of beginnings, the miracle of beginnings. Maybe there is something for us to do in the boat that we live in that's being tossed by the waves. Maybe we do need to take that first step. Maybe we need to take that first step towards healing, that first step towards sobriety, that first step towards caring for our mental and physical and spiritual wellness. Maybe we need to take that first step towards reconciliation with a friend or a neighbor or a loved one. Maybe we need to take that first step across the aisle and get to know the other person. Maybe we need to take that first step to get to understand someone's story and their point of view, even though it's different than ours. Maybe we need to take that first step to see Christ in others, to see Christ working through others. Maybe that's the miracle, taking that first step and then taking that next step and taking that next step because we believe in the miracle of new beginnings. And I don't think this just applies to us as individuals. It applies to our life in the church. I think as individuals in the church, maybe we do need to take that first step to a ministry we've been interested in. Maybe we need to take that first step towards trying something new, or taking that first step towards helping out in a way we haven't before. Or maybe it's the first step is to step back from something we've always done. I don't know what that step is for you. Maybe as a church, though, we need to be like Peter and be willing to take that first step out of the boat. They didn't like the way the boat was going. They didn't like the way the compass was pointed. They didn't like what was going on. No church has ever closed because it hasn't taken a risk. We take the first step out of the boat. Now, the rest of them all sat in the back in the boat and didn't move. It was Peter who took the step. But maybe as a church we step out into our neighborhood. Maybe we take a step in a direction we haven't stepped before as a church. In John's Gospel, we know and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? It can be translated as, it's been transliterated as, and the Word became flesh and blood and moved into our neighborhood. We have around our stained glass windows all these names of communities, Philippi and Ephesus and Corinth and Phoenicia and Galatia, all the churches, all the places where churches existed in community. Maybe the church needs to take a step out and say, what's going on in the community, in the neighborhood around us? How is God at work in that community? And listen to where what we can provide matches the world's needs. Where our purpose and our mission coincides with what God is already doing outside our doors. We need to take the first step. We need to be willing to risk something. We need to be willing to believe in miracles, to believe in the miracle that we will take that first step. And we will take that next step and that next step. And when we do see the world around us and the storms around us and the white caps and the sails are ripping and falling into the water, when that happens, we can trust that Jesus is there to pick us up and hold us. And then we can take the next step together and the next first step again. Because we, like Meister Eckhart, believe in the miracles of new beginnings. Amen.